right, welcome to the show. This is the Shatter the Script podcast, Week 13 College Football Edition, and we've got a ton in store for you guys this afternoon. And so I'm recording, on a Monday afternoon, and we just released the STS poll per usual, and the AP poll versus the STS poll. We're going to have them side by side, kind of cross-evaluating what the AP poll got right, what the STS poll is, and then going into our normal analysis of. I'll just kind of be peeking over at the AP poll, but nonetheless, I mean, there was a lot of action this past week, especially in the SEC, as well as in the Big Ten, with some really close matchups with key teams that are in the hunt for Big Ten championship contention, as well as possible playoff spots. And so as we get closer to December, like I've been talking about all month, we get to evaluate the bracketology coming up. We get to evaluate a closer look at conference championships coming up. And so we're day after day, night after night, getting a more clear image of what to expect with conference championships, as well as the first four out, maybe the four that get in, or one or two that get in over the first four out, those sorts of things. So a lot still has to happen. I know it might seem set in stone to some, but in reality, there is a lot that still needs to happen. And so I'm excited to dive into it all. If you're a first-time listener, thanks so much for joining in. You can find us in our link tree, in our bios. That'll give you access to all the socials, all the places that you can listen. We release episodes on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify, where you can watch or listen. We release 30 to 60 second clips on TikTok, YouTube Shorts, and Instagram, and then on Twitter, constant analysis. So the link tree has all of that in there. If you're on the YouTube channel, you can access it there. And then leave a subscription. Subscribe. It costs you nothing. I don't ask for anything. I like the discourse with the audience. So I appreciate the support so far in season 3. We've had tremendous success as an independent platform. So excited to continue to grow that. And then of course, December 1st, a fun announcement is going to be released to you guys, and I'm really excited about that. And that's coming up rather quickly in the next 2.5 weeks or so. So super exciting stuff. But without further ado, let's get into the STS poll here. I'm going to put it up on the screen, and let's evaluate it case by case, if you will. So, one of the cool things with the STS poll is, on a consistent basis, this is like I want to say 10 of me generating a top 25 list. But I think one of the cool things is these group of 5 teams have kind of categorically inserted themselves in a similar place. And it didn't have to move, the STS poll in total didn't have to move all too much compared to last week. You still kind of have the categorical ACC teams bunched together, but it's slimmer. You still have the G5 categorical teams bunched together, but it's slimmer. Last week, a lot of them were the first 4 out. This week, I've included 3 of them with a newcomer in James Madison. So let's dive right into it. And like I said, last week, with Pittsburgh and Notre Dame and things like that, like you're going to notice, on the list, if you're watching, like Pittsburgh found itself at number 25 on the list. I didn't knock them all too much for losing against Notre Dame. I knew they were going to lose that game because their coach practically said so. And when your coach says you're going to lose a game, you're probably going to lose a game. So I found that interesting from a coaching perspective, but then also interesting from a scheduling perspective. So nonetheless, the STS poll week 13. So just outside of the script, we've got SMU at 7-3, Missouri at 7-3, Louisville Cardinals at 7-3, and the Arizona Wildcats at 7-3. All 7-win teams, all 3 losses. So I think the key matchup within the outside the script vicinity is Louisville going to play SMU. So going on the road, Louisville coming off a loss. Louisville had some success earlier in the season, but going into SMU, where Miami lost earlier in the season, is definitely eyes on this weekend. It's something that we all got to pay attention to as an audience, and as it pertains to the ACC conference championship race, because SMU only has one loss within the conference. So their two losses came to subpar Big 12 programs this year in Baylor and TCU, who are both 4 or more losses on the year. So that one loss that they have within their conference is the only one that they have accumulated thus far. So technically, in terms of conference, they are still in the hunt. And they've been just outside of the script for 2 weeks now. And I think that's an appropriate spot, because this is the game to put them in that context, that to potentially jump them above and into the top 25 rankings. So, but I kind of have it categorized as as like these 22 through 25 plus the just outside of the script. They're good enough to be ranked. You could put any of them in there within that category. They're good enough to be ranked football teams, but they're not good enough to win their conference, nor make the college football playoff, in my opinion. I just don't think they have the firepower. And in terms of strength of schedule, as well as what they've done with the schedules that they've been given, they haven't been able to overcome those and show enough thus far to say, yeah, they deserve a spot. But are they going to be fun bowl games? Sure. Absolutely. They're going to be ones that are going to be fun to tune into on a random day during the holiday season and around Christmas and New Year's. 1,000%. Like, these are not bad programs. These are just the programs that are just outside of the script in terms of the vastness of college football this year. So, but I kind of want to get into the G5 schools again. I did that last week. I want to do it again, but let's start categorically making our way to the G5 schools. Number 25, as I mentioned earlier, is Pittsburgh Panthers at 7-3, coming off a loss to Notre Dame, 37-15. This was the College Game Day event. Poor choice, in my opinion. I mean, especially after Nardunzi's comments saying that they didn't care that Notre Dame was going to beat them by 100. They might as well just go out there and just prep for the ACC games coming up. So with Pittsburgh playing Georgia Tech on the road this upcoming week, we're going to get to know this team a little bit better. And let's not rule out a Pittsburgh win, because Georgia Tech has been struggling as of late. We know they accumulated their first loss not too long ago. They've had some very close matchups with some subpar opponents within their conference and things like that. So that's something worth watching. Tennessee makes their way back into the top 25, just inside at number 24, and then followed by that number 23, Texas. So, people are going to ask, what has Tennessee done to be ranked? I understand. To me, it's similar to the Notre Dame comparison, where, it was like, okay, are we going to reward these teams being extremely close to climbing that mountain? Because without those two losses that Notre Dame obtained early in the season, they are an undefeated football team, and their resume would look, great. But they have those two losses. The same thing with Tennessee. They were very close against Georgia. They were very close against OU. And so they have a matchup at the end of the year versus Vanderbilt that could propel them back into like a great finish to the season and maybe be spoilers to Vanderbilt. But, Tennessee thus far, I get it, man. I mean, I know, but are they better than the ACC, Missouri, and Arizona? I believe so. And I don't, there's Nebraska was in there last week. They're outside of the top 25 now. You kind of no place to put them. And there's some other teams within that category there. And I just look at it and say, who's better? And I would say Tennessee. The Tennessee's only problem is they can't stop an SEC offense from scoring 30 plus points, but Tennessee also scores a lot of points too. So their most devastating loss was Alabama on the road, 37-20. So nonetheless, you can make the argument either way. And then right in front of them is, I think, the next best 3-loss SEC team being Texas. And of course, that would mean that Missouri is outside of that. But number 23 is the Texas Longhorns. They were at number 9 last week, and I put them along with Oklahoma and Vanderbilt and all the 2-loss SEC programs kind of stacked together and then ranked in terms of head-to-head matchups. So Texas was number 9 naturally because they beat both Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, which are the best wins on their resume. And then, of course, what we saw Saturday night was we finally got to understand what Texas is. And so I remember stating in last week's episode, I wasn't all too confident in Texas being a top 10 ranked team on my list. But then I looked at teams from like 11 to 15 and I said, well, these teams haven't showcased to be better. Texas seemingly was on the come up. There seemed to be some momentum there. There seemed to be maybe some mojo from Arch Manning. And then at the same time, I expressed my concerns for Texas, where I would state the offense looks like they're trying not to lose, but their defense has shown a lot of inconsistencies throughout the year. And they're going against a very, very resilient Georgia team on the road at home. And they're already 0-2 against Georgia, 0-3 now. So 3 losses to Georgia thus far since joining the SEC. And that's not the greatest look in the world. And to lose by that amount, too, just kind of showcased where Quinn Ewers' team was with a similar roster versus where Arch Manning is with this roster. And we talked about it early in the year as well. There was a lot of offensive guys that left for the draft. There was a lot, and that needs to be taken into account. However, the drop-off, I would believe, isn't so substantial as some might claim. I still think Texas has the roster to win football games, but when you watch their offense perform, again, they seem like they're playing try not to lose. What does that mean? Jared, what does that mean that the Texas offense is playing not to lose? It's the high percentage throws that they call schematically. It's the screen passes, the smokes, the jailbreaks, the tight ends. They're up, they're down multiple possessions. They're still throwing bubble screens. They're accumulating very short yardage plays. There's no shot plays being executed. Throws downfield are inaccurate. All these second to third level throws are just inadequate. They're not hitting for Arch Manning, and you could say they're not hitting. You can also say they're just inaccurate passes. And so I just haven't trusted what I've seen from Texas. Now I can cemently say that Texas is not a strong SEC team this year. I don't think so. I think they can surprise you, and we really wanted that offense, defense, and special teams to click versus Georgia on the road. Whether that was going to be enough or not, I figured it could be, but it didn't happen. So, like I always say, if ifs and buts were honey and nuts, we'd all have a Merry Christmas. And I've tamed that from my high school coach. I still think it applies today. But nonetheless, Texas has the big game against Texas A&M at home. I can still see them winning that football game. What does that mean for Texas A&M? Well, A&M would be 11-1 and 7-1 in the conference, I believe. So, not too much damage to Texas A&M if they lose that game. And if Texas were to finish 9-3, it's a really good 9-3 year. It really is. They're not going to make the playoffs, no, but I had people bickering about, OU spent all this time and effort recruiting and doing all this to be 9-3 football team. Dude, their strength of schedule, you finished 9-3. That's an impeccable year, extravagant year, phenomenal year. Same thing with, and then Texas in a lesser category than that. I understand they're going to play A&M, and A&M is a top 5 or top 10 ranked team. Ohio State, top 10 ranked team. Vanderbilt, top 15 ranked team. OU, top 15 ranked team. They played all those guys. But it was what they did against the lesser opponents that was far less impressive. But at the end of the day, going 9-3 in the SEC is not something to be upset about. It's not, whether it might not be good enough to get in to the college football playoff, but let's be honest, like this year, Alabama kind of assisted with it, but we didn't expect Ole Miss, Georgia, and Texas A&M to be one-loss programs. We thought more categorically that we would see more two-loss teams within the SEC. And shoot, we were very close to having it with Texas A&M down 3-30 at halftime versus South Carolina at home. And so Georgia and Ole Miss would have been the only two teams with one loss. But at the same time, it's going to be impossible, unless A&M does it, for a team to go undefeated in the SEC. It's just a different atmosphere now, and it's what all of you guys have been asking for. Everyone's been asking for this. Oh, Alabama always runs the tables. Alabama, this, that, and the other. Georgia always. Well, now everyone's playing each other close. There's one team beats the other. It's a lot like the NFL, and the committee and the fans have to get used to that, and I've preached that all throughout this year. You're going to have to get used to these conference teams, especially in the SEC, with the amount of money they pay and the amount of leverage that they have in the transfer portal and with the head coaches and NIL and their draft picks historically. You're going to have to get used to 2-3 loss programs being really good football teams and considered in the selection process. But we have figured out what Texas is. They are just an above average SEC team this year that when all the pieces come together, they could possibly steal a victory. Houston at number 22, not much to cover there. They are 8-2 in the Big 12. They're probably fourth place behind the Utah Utes. And then here's the group of 5 teams. Number 21, Tulane. Number 20, James Madison. And number 19, North Texas. And so I have a lot of friends and family that come from these types of schools that were moved up either from FCS to the FBS, or there's just a little bit of an entertainment level to the G5 schools. Like, it's kind of fun paying attention to them to a certain extent. And, if they're matched up together, it's like, oh, this is an entertaining game. Hey, we got a Tulane and Memphis on a Friday night last week. Like, I'll sit down and watch that game for sure. Like, these guys they're definitely not bad football teams. I mean, Memphis beat Arkansas. Tulane had a win earlier in the season. Navy just beat Memphis. And North Texas had a nice win earlier in the year. James Madison played Louisville decently close. So, there's just a couple of things in here. It's like, look, these are not bad athletes. And a lot of people get this impression that they're bad athletes. They just don't have the depth that these bigger schools do. They don't have the depth that even the Big 12 schools do. But do they accumulate good athletes? Absolutely. 100%. And that should not be disregarded. But North Texas in the lead here in the AAC, the American Athletic Conference. They're 9-1 thus far. Their only loss is to South Florida at home, and they're putting up 60-plus points. But their biggest wins are Washington State, who SEC teams had trouble with, and some other, I believe an ACC team had trouble with Washington State as well. They got a loss versus UTSA. They had a win versus Washington State, a win versus UTSA, and a win versus Navy, who just beat Memphis. So, some big wins there within the G5, realm. And then South Florida, I think they're out. They're definitely out at 7-3. They've got losses to Miami, Florida. They've got Memphis as a loss, Navy as a loss, and then a win at Florida, which is their biggest hoorah of the year. And that's great. South Florida beating the Florida Gators is a great accomplishment. You're on the road in a very hostile environment. Now, whether or not the fans really truly showed up for that game and hooping and hollering, that's debatable. But that was prior to Billy Napier's being fired. Tulane is in the hunt at 8-2. That's why they're ranked. They have wins versus Northwestern, which was their big at the beginning of the year, who just played close with Michigan. You got Duke as a win. That's an impressive one, as ACC teams have played close with Duke. They have a win over Memphis on that Friday night and a win over East Carolina, who just upset one of the other AAC teams. And then their losses are to UTSA and Ole Miss. So in terms of impressive resume, I mean, you're kind of looking at Tulane being one of the most impressive, right behind North Texas. James Madison only loss came to Louisville, 14-28. Other games, in my opinion, are too small in importance to be elected as a G5 playoff contender. There's just no way. You can't do it. They're not going to eclipse that 13th ranked spot. They're not going to eclipse a playoff spot. That would be detrimental to the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. No disrespect to James Madison, but you just can't do it logistically. Nonetheless, they're having a phenomenal year. Their margins of victory are definitely notable, and they've had a lot of blowouts versus teams within their own conference. So that's good to see. And they played close with Louisville. Only losing by 2 possessions is something worth noting. But Louisville is going to end up 4th or 5th within their conference this year, pending a win against SMU. So there's that. But again, I stand true to the 8 to 12 team playoff for Group of 5 schools. I think that would be entertaining. You can either do a BCS national championship route for G5 teams to say, all right, let's have the 2 best G5 teams play one another in a championship and have their own trophy. I think that's reputable. I think that's something that's an honest and genuine accomplishment for these teams, because what's going to happen is you're going to have these G5 teams go, we want to be in, and then they play in. And it's like, well, we don't have the money to compete against these guys. Who said, well, in the first place, why did you want to get in? Let's just play within your own category and have accomplishments through that. And then those players coming up to the ranks, freshman, sophomore, can hit the transfer portal, and you can accumulate the best young talent, develop them similar to like an above level junior college, and bring them up through the ranks, a lot like North Texas's 0-star quarterback, who's going to probably transfer to a big time school within next year or the year following. So maybe not a huge jump, but he's going to jump to the ACC or the Big 12. I could almost guarantee it. All right, the ACC, number 18 is Virginia. Number 17 is Miami. Number 16 is Georgia Tech. So within this category, we talked about it last week, the ACC kind of like projecting the conference finale. Virginia, I talked about they've been begging to lose for that 3 to 4 week stretch where, they played close with California. They played close with Washington State. They played, there's one I was thinking of. And they played close with somebody else right before then or right after then, however their schedule worked. And then now they're going into their bye week. And then after the bye week, they get to play Virginia Tech, who will be coming off of a game versus Miami. More likely than not, Virginia will win that football game. More likely. I mean, Virginia Tech's going to be 3-8. It is a rivalry game. Virginia Tech has won 4 out of the last 5 matchups between the two, if you want some historical analysis between those couple teams. And I think they have a tendency to slip, but more than likely, with coming off a bye and having their opponent coming off a ranked game versus Miami, who has a very physical defense on paper, that just seems like an easy victory for Virginia. So more likely than not, unless Georgia Tech slips to Pittsburgh, we're going to see a Georgia Tech Virginia ACC championship. And there are teams that are still in the hunt, like I mentioned. Louisville has 2 losses. They're most likely out, but they can be spoilers for SMU. SMU still only has 1 loss, but they have 2 losses in the Big 12, which is detrimental to college football playoff selection, but not to the conference. So 2 losses in the Big 12. They're only 1 loss in the ACC. They could beat Louisville and then win their final game and be 2nd or 3rd ranked within the conference. But all of that doesn't matter if Virginia wins. And Miami kind of needs a miracle. I think the brand is excelling them over some other ranked teams within their own conference, and their margin of victories are pretty substantial. And they've showcased early in the season that they had the capability to win out of conference as well, which some of these other schools have not done. We'll get to see that with Georgia Tech when they play Georgia at the end of the year. Will that matter towards the ACC championship game? No, it will not. Everything kind of rides for Georgia Tech, for the Yellow Jackets this weekend versus Pittsburgh, who I think has a decent chance to win. Pittsburgh. So anyway, number 18, Virginia, number 17, Miami, and number 16, Georgia Tech. And that's about as categorical as you can get. But in terms of head-to-heads, none of those teams have played one another. That's interesting. However, the teams that are just outside of the script have played Miami. And I think Louisville is somewhere in there between the 2 or 3 of them. But here's how I have it look. So Virginia drops to Virginia Tech. A lot could happen. Miami needs an SMU loss because SMU is 5-1 in the ACC. Pittsburgh is 7-3 going at Georgia Tech, 9-1. Pittsburgh's 5-1 in the ACC, and their losses are to West Virginia, Louisville, and Notre Dame. So 2 out of conference losses, 1 to an independent. And then they go at Miami, Florida in week 14. So they play Georgia Tech this week and then Miami, Florida this week or next week. So even if they beat Georgia Tech, they still got to beat Miami. So a very tough November for Pittsburgh. My overall analysis, though, SMU, Pittsburgh, Miami, Virginia, and Georgia Tech are all still in the hunt for first and second place in the ACC championship game. So we'll just see how that plays out. All right, transitioning into, again, this was tiered as the outliers, or the outsiders, if you will, last week. But number 15, Michigan. Number 14, Utah. Number 13, USC. Number 12, Notre Dame. And number 1, BYU. Michigan, number 15, just came off an interesting game versus Northwestern. The score was 24-22. The box score says otherwise. The box score says Northwestern beat them. I mean, 3 lost fumbles for Michigan's offense, 2 interceptions from Bryce Underwood, and Northwestern lost. So not the best matchup for Michigan, and they cannot have one of those goose eggs again this season. They cannot. They're going to play Maryland this week, and then they're going to go play, of course, in the rivalry week, they're going to play Ohio State. They get to play them at home. That's great. And they've got their number the last couple years, for sure, like we mentioned. But, in terms of a win is a win, you're going to take that. But Michigan, 8-2 now. They're right there because their second loss was to Oklahoma. So, and that's looking a whole lot better after Oklahoma beat Alabama, who was a top 5 team in the nation. So Michigan I had them at 16 last week. I thought about putting them at 17 this week, somewhere within that realm, kind of dropping a spot because of their performance. And then I kind of looked back and I said, well, look, in the Big Ten, they're 8-2 with a true freshman quarterback in Bryce Underwood. That kind of needs to be celebrated, not neglected. So the fact that they are finding ways to run the football, pass the ball decently effective, and win 8 football games already, and possibly accumulate a 9th win and go 9-3, pending a rivalry game versus Ohio State, right? Like, this is a great season for Michigan, and the sky's the limit for them. What they do with their head coach, I'm not sure if he's the long-term solution. I've covered that already. But I didn't want to knock them too much. I kind of wanted to give Michigan a little bit of grace there. The AP poll, I believe, the AP poll has Texas in front of Michigan, which is wild. And Miami. That's wild. So AP poll has Miami number 14 and Texas at number 17 and Michigan at number 18. So I just heavily disagree with that. That's why I have them at number 15. Number 14, you're welcome, by the way. Number 14 is the Utah Utes. They've been ultimately impressive outside of the BYU and Texas Tech game. And only losing to BYU by 3. We're not celebrating losses at the Shatter the Script Network, but we are watching them closely. Like Dave Portnoy was watching the coins drop in front of him in that pizza video. Just locked in, laser eyes, right? But not much to cover there. Like, I like Utah, but are they going to make themselves a case to get into the college football playoff? Most likely not. The way that the selection committee is starting to lean, most likely not. And, for a Big 12 team to not play in their conference championship game is another big It's not gonna generate a lot of momentum with the committee. But number 13, USC, them playing close with Iowa. I was a little bit off on the prediction, but I believe USC was trailing some of the game versus Iowa, and playing them at home, securing the W. That's a hard-fought game. Iowa plays all their teams pretty damn close. You can catch yourself in a lot of danger versus Iowa. So, props to Lincoln Riley's offense for outscoring Iowa 26-21. USC is now 8-2, just the same as Michigan. And one of their losses is to Notre Dame. So both Michigan and USC have one loss within their conference. Something to watch, because USC is going into Oregon, into Eugene, Oregon this weekend to play Dan Lanning and Dante Moore, who are number 7 on this list. So there's a lot that could shake up here, because if USC goes there and upsets Oregon, what does that do for Indiana and Ohio State? Not much. But what does it do for USC's playoff chances? And what does that do to Oregon's playoff chances? In all honesty, I think that might kick Oregon out and put USC in, because Oregon already lost Indiana, and then they could lose to USC. Then what do they have to stand on? And then Oregon's got to go play Washington the final game of the year, which is rivalry week. And so so there's a lot that can happen there. Big Ten's kind of underestimatedly close, with not in first and second place, but there's ways that it could turn into chaos. And it's definitely worth putting a pin in and saying, let's see what happens. But I don't like to make assumptions too much on how that might go down, but I do like to play with it a little bit and say, hey, these are possibilities that the fan needs to consider. These are something that maybe the mainstream media isn't talking about too much. The fact that USC and Michigan only have one loss within their conference. So you could argue that Michigan and USC have had far tougher schedules than Ohio State and Indiana and Oregon. Oregon has had a pretty decently tough schedule. And before the season started, you were like, okay, they got to play Penn State. They got to play USC, Washington. They got to play Indiana. 4 or 5 conference games within the Big Ten. That can be difficult. So that's something worth noting. Number 12 is Notre Dame. They're still at the same spot. I'm still taking the vow not to put them in the top 10. Yes, that might be out of spite, but they played Pittsburgh, who I mentioned before. The coach is literally like, we don't really care if we lose or win. We want to win, but we got to go play an ACC schedule after this. We got to play Miami, and we got to play Georgia Tech. So what importance is this Notre Dame to me if I am 5-1 in the ACC? So I'd rather win the conference championship and have something on my resume so I don't get canned, rather than worry about some FBS independent that scheduled us in week 12. So nonetheless, CJ Carr has gotten increasingly better throughout the year. Jeremiah Love is still making the flashiest plays at running back thus far in the season. The only other running back that has had a better football season than Jeremiah Love, considering the workload, is Ahmad Hardy with Missouri. Over 1,300 yards and 15 touchdowns. Jeremiah Love has 1,100 scrimmage yards with 10-plus touchdowns. What people may not consider, Jeremiah Love has less carries, or attempts, if you will. He's also in sort of a 60-40% snap share with Jadarian Price. I would assume, I don't know the exact percentages, but I would assume Jadarian Price is getting some carries and getting not 50-50 snap count, but somewhere close to that. So, and that's good. I think that's great, because I think they're both great athletes. We'll get back to Notre Dame here in a minute. Number 11, BYU. BYU jumps a couple spots from last week. I like it. Notre Dame is, BYU is 11 on both the AP poll and on the STS poll. They don't belong in the top 10, not quite yet. If USC beats Oregon, they're going to probably jump BYU on my list. If Michigan beats Ohio State or becomes 9-2, they're going to get very, very close to BYU. But here's the tricky part: is there's not enough leeway to move USC, BYU, and Michigan when USC has already lost to Notre Dame and BYU has already lost to Texas Tech. So there's just not much movement. Utah, the furthest they could possibly go is 14. This is the highest rank they could possibly, unless Notre Dame loses somehow to Syracuse. So these teams are practically cemented. But BYU, phenomenal performance late at night this past Saturday versus TCU. Kind of went a lot like how I figured. A lot of scoring from BYU. TCU just does not have a good defense this year in the Big 12, but BYU took every bit of advantage of that. Their freshman quarterback is starting to look better throughout the year. And they are the strongest contender outside of Texas Tech in the Big 12. And I don't think anybody's denying that. But I don't think anybody is watching BYU besides BYU fans. Again, I always say that, besides their own fans, and saying they deserve to be in the college football playoff. It just, there's not much water that they're carrying. And I think they'll be definitely considered. I think they'll definitely be a part of that first 4 out category. I think that's fine, but I think it's a brand thing. I really do. I don't think people look at BYU and go, "Oh, hot damn, BYU this year." And that shouldn't happen. I'm not saying that that's the way it should be. I'm not at all saying that, because in the new college football atmosphere, brands shouldn't matter as much. I mean, they're going to matter to the players, but this BYU coach has done practically nothing but win over there in BYU. So what about the brand? So I like to see all sides of the argument, but in terms of them getting a playoff spot, I think they should continue to prime themselves, next year and the following year. I don't think people want to see number 47 Bear, the freshman quarterback for BYU, play in the playoffs. I just don't. I think if you asked a selection committee guy behind closed doors, "Hey, what about BYU?" He said, that jersey looks ridiculous. And I don't know. It just something seems off about BYU. And I look at these other teams, they got a powerful schedule, and they go into how the SEC, the Big Ten, are more powerful schedules than the Big 12, and they got their butts kicked by Texas Tech, and they almost lost to Utah. They find every excuse possible to remove BYU from that list. So you guys are basically excommunicado when it comes to the playoffs this year and last year. And I'm sorry for that. It shouldn't exactly be that way. Number 10, Vanderbilt, coming off a bye week. Number 9, Alabama. And here's the thing. We're going to get into the top 10 here. Number 10, Vanderbilt. Number 9, Alabama. Number 8, Oklahoma. Oklahoma usurping Alabama on this list due to that impressive win on the road. Exactly what we needed for some SEC chaos. Number 7, Oregon. Number 6, Texas Tech. So within this category, not much to say about Vanderbilt. They got a big-time matchup versus Tennessee at the end of the year that, again, rivalry game. That's going to be... It's going to decide whether or not Vanderbilt's going to be in the college football playoff is what my belief is. Because when you're looking at Vanderbilt's wins, and we'll go in here and re-educate myself. I know they have LSU as one. You got a win versus South Carolina early in the year on the road. And at that time, people always tend to forget this sort of stuff. At that time, South Carolina is a 9-3 football team in 2024. They were just outside of the college football playoff. We had people calling it Cocktober, Cockvember, these things to say that, the Gamecocks, they really turn it on, in the fall. And so Lenore Sellers is a great quarterback, and they got a good coach in Shane Beamer. So at that time, that was more of an impressive win than what it is renowned as now. But at the same time, South Carolina has played 7 ranked SEC football teams this year, and all you guys do is look at their record and go, "That's a bad team." It's not. It's not a bad team. They have athletes surrounding that team. They're just not good enough to beat those SEC ranked teams. They just haven't done it. And I can't exactly tell you why. I just came from watching South Carolina and Texas A&M, but I like the coach. Their quarterback's fine. Lenore Sellers is a great athlete. He was considered a Heisman candidate coming into this year. But 7 ranked SEC games so far in 2024 is insane. That's by far the toughest schedule that I've heard of. So I'm going to cut him a little bit of slack there. And I think you out-of-conference people that are not an SEC quote-unquote homer should consider the same thing. They lost to Bama. They beat LSU and Missouri, lost to Texas, and beat Auburn. I mean, there's not a lot of weight that they're carrying anymore. LSU's no longer ranked. Missouri's no longer ranked. They only beat LSU by a touchdown, although it was a pretty dominating win. They only beat Missouri by a touchdown after losing Pribula that week. And that was tied. I want to say this was an OT game. No, it wasn't an OT game. They got their butts handed to by Texas, which doesn't look so great anymore. After all that being said, if Vanderbilt goes into Tennessee at the end of the year and loses, which I currently have them projected to do so, I have them projected to lose, they're out. And they win, then I think they're one of the first 4 out. I don't think Vanderbilt carries as much weight as a lot might claim, as Diego Pavia might claim. But yeah, you can have your Heisman Trophy if you want it. I think you're like 7th in odds, but whatever. Number 9, Alabama, coming off a loss to Oklahoma, 23-21, I believe was the final score. This game was deep in the trenches, is what it was. It was trench warfare. It was Oklahoma's defense being top 5 in the nation. I talked about this. I did. So Oklahoma's number 8. I talked many times about this. Look, they're boringly good, which is the best kind of good. Have you watched the Philadelphia Eagles? They're boring. They hold on to the ball for so damn long. They only throw for 150 touchdowns a game. They got a tush push that's annoying. They got a head coach that's been there for a while that accumulated new staff, similar to the Oklahoma Sooners this year. They brought in a lot of guys in the offseason. So did the Sooners this year. Their best players on the outside aren't producing. Neither are the Oklahoma Sooners guys. But what happens? They're winning. They've dropped a game or two. Yeah, but they're winning. Their defense is playing phenomenal. Eagles have played back-to-back playoff good teams, the Packers and the Lions, and held them with under 10 points and won. And they neither game did the Eagles score more than 20. More than 17, actually, is better put. They're winning, though. Like, they don't give a shit. That's what Oklahoma's like. Oklahoma does not care. They're winning football games. They are now 8 wins on the year in one of the toughest strength of schedules, I would say right behind South Carolina on paper. Impressive. Fighting their asses off. Do I like their offense? No, I don't. I don't think anybody does. I don't think anybody's watching Oklahoma's offense and going, this is a powerhouse. But their defense, which is what Brent Venables was hired for, it's as advertised, 1,000%. And defense does win championships and at least gives you a hell of a shot to get in, which it has done for Oklahoma this year. So now, Oklahoma, with the final 2 games being unranked opponents in Missouri and LSU. LSU fired their head coach. Missouri lost their starting quarterback. They could go 10-2, and they're in. Boom shakalaka. Boomer Sooner. Number 7 is Oregon. Oregon coming off a win versus Iowa, right? Yeah, number 20. I'm tripping. Gosh damn it. Minnesota. That's what it was. It was a Friday night game versus Minnesota, 42-13. Sorry, tried to eyeball it. It's like Tony Stark in Civil War. He's like, I'm going to eyeball it. Hits that thing. Bullseye. Yeah, I missed. Bucky escaped. Boring game. Exactly what I expected. I predicted, I think, 42-21. I thought it'd be fun to predict a Friday night game, but not much to cover there. But number 6, Texas Tech, doing what they do best, getting Jacob Rodriguez a touchdown on offense, giving him a little bit more leeway and leverage in the Heisman candidacy recommendations. I think he's great. I think he's a phenomenal linebacker. He's got better stats than Monte Teo was, than what Monte Teo had. And Monte Teo was a Heisman contender with a fake girlfriend somewhere out there. So shout out Texas Tech. That's 2 weeks in a row jumping Oregon in the rankings. They could argumentatively jump Ole Miss in the rankings. I've enjoyed watching Ole Miss at a much bigger capacity. There's like, Florida only lost to Ole Miss by 10. It's like, look, Florida beat Ole Miss last year. So there's obviously something in the water, possibly, I don't know, a gator? But the Rebels rebel and get a win over the Florida Gators. Number 4, this is the top 10. Number 5, Ole Miss. Number 4, Georgia. Number 3, Indiana. Number 2, Texas A&M. And number 1, Ohio State. Georgia getting it done at home, 35-10 in a demonstrative win over Arch Manning and the Texas Longhorns. I mentioned before, we kind of know what this team is, but we know exactly what Georgia is, and we have known what Georgia is. They're a resilient football team. They finish in the fourth quarter. If you have a lead in the fourth quarter, you absolutely have a much better shot, a slimmer chance, but a much better shot to beat Georgia. If you are behind in the fourth quarter, you're done. The way that Georgia finishes football games is great. It's phenomenal. And it's all year it has proven itself. Indiana stays at number 3. They're coming off that game versus Penn State last week. They're going into week 12 doing what they do best. I always forget with Indiana because I know they won their game. It was a shutout versus Wisconsin, like 34-0. So Indiana doing what Curt Cignetti has coached. I think they have I want to see this. I think Indiana has multiple shutouts this year. Indiana State, almost shut out Illinois, beat them 63-10. Almost shut out UCLA, allowed 6 points. It wasn't a shutout. They won 31-7 versus Wisconsin. But boy, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games holding the opponents under 10 points. Very impressive resume for Curt Cignetti, Fernando Mendoza, and the Indiana Hoosiers. I'll skip Texas A&M. Number 1 is Ohio State. They're playing the Rutgers this weekend. I think they're coming off a bye week. Not much to talk about there. Julian Sand having a phenomenal year, 24 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. Jeremiah Smith, still great. Ryan Day, still great. And Matt Patricia, a phenomenal addition to this defensive staff. Okay, I'm going to get rid of the STS poll, and we're going to cover some key games. And you guys probably know which one I'm about to be covering. Let's start from best to worst. I got to go to the Texas A&M game. Thank you to my buddy Brendan. Phenomenal, great seats, by the way. Great seats. But I got to go to the game. I was right behind the South Carolina sideline. Stadium was packed. It's 11 a.m. game. Got there at like 8:30 in the morning, tailgating a little bit, get the coffee in the system, and it was a great atmosphere, 1,000%. And when I tell you, I can't stress this enough. There's no words that can describe this. When I tell you that Texas A&M played the worst half of football I have ever seen, and I've been a fan of them my entire life, that's what I saw. It was garbage. And honestly, and I hate to be super critical of Marcel Reed, but honestly, it was all Marcel Reed. It was corner routes in the back of the end zone, wide open, underthrown by 15 yards, interception. It was an interception by Texas A&M Aggies defense, getting him inside the 10, coming up with 0 points. It was also the kicker, Bond. Bond has struggled all season long. If it comes down to a field goal kick, I think Texas A&M loses a game. It was missed kicks within 20 yards, missed kicks within 40. Right before halftime, missing out on points. A&M had the opportunity to be 13-20 going into halftime or more. Arguably 13-13 because of the fumble by Marcel Reed that turned into a touchdown for South Carolina. That's like 7 or 8 different things that happened in the first half that I was like, holy smokes. And you get the game closer in a way, and then, or not closer, you get some momentum, it's gone. You get some more momentum, it's gone. You get a chance, it's gone. That number 8 taking it 70 yards or so for a touchdown, just beelining, 6'5", 240 pounds, should be a tight end, plays receiver. I thought it was over. Of course I would. But you know what? Not a single fan left that football game. Nobody. Everyone stayed right in their seats. If anything, we grabbed an extra beer and we said, let's just see what happens. We're the number 2 team in the country. Let's just see what happens. Maybe this is bad karma. Maybe this is what we do every year. And boom, touchdown. Stop. Boom, touchdown. Stop. Boom, touchdown, stop. Boom, touchdown, stop. 31-30, boom, we're back. I'm like, and so I know everybody, I'm not going to be any different by saying this. I know Marcel Reed was a completely different quarterback than the first half. Arguably, the second half of Marcel Reed versus South Carolina was the best Marcel Reed I've ever seen him as. And that's eclipsing the LSU game where he broke out last year. I don't know what changed, but they didn't establish a run in the second half. It was all explosive plays. It was second-level throws. It was on-the-money wheel routes. It was young guys stepping up. And the protection was phenomenal. The play calling was great. And outside of that, the one thing, here's the ironic part. The one thing that stood out to me in the Texas A&M game, everybody's like, oh my God, you got to see the best comeback in Texas A&M history and arguably college football history. How do you feel? And my response was, I feel like the call on 3rd and goal when we were up 31-30 was so abysmal. It left me wondering how in the world we won that game after we had won the game. That's what I thought. I said, well, we could have easily been up 4 points with having to stop South Carolina with one timeout in less than 2 minutes from scoring a touchdown. Instead, we were letting South Carolina get less than 2 minutes with one timeout to only score a field goal to win. And their field goal kicker had made some field goals that day. But leaving the decision of like a throw or an option up to the running back who is never in that scenario was the most abysmal play call of that day. And I know Colin Klein is kicking himself, unless that just wasn't designed and the running back did that out of impulse, then he's definitely losing his mind going. I mean, I think Elko dropped like 6 F-bombs after he saw that because he knew this could have easily costed them the greatest comeback in college football history. All you had to do was run it up the A-gap. And then, if that didn't work, either go for it again, make South Carolina burn a timeout, or kick a field goal and go at 4. So, anywho, miraculous. There's no other words. I don't know what you guys want me to say. I mean, do you want me to say like, oh, A&M's the best team in the country? They didn't show it in the first half. You look in the second half, yeah, they showed it. Obviously, they're like, well, what do you have Texas A&M over Indiana? Well, as I mentioned before, South Carolina has played 7 ranked SEC teams this year. They're not a bad rostered football team. You look at those boys up close, those are some big-ass boys. They played great. They played hard. They've played hard against everybody. And Shane Beamer's a good coach. He's a culture guy. And they got up ahead. This is what happens when you play like crap. When you have turnovers, like 6 or 7 turnovers in the or 4 or 5 turnovers in the first half and missed field goals, yeah, you're going to get down a couple possessions against the SEC unless they have Jackson Arnold. Then you're going to be winning by 7. So yeah, I put them in front of Indiana because I saw the greatest comeback in college football history. And so whether or not you say, oh, they were down at halftime, game's not finished. It don't matter. Do it. A&M won. Period. So this whole like, oh, but how can you be down that much? I told you how. You can turn over the football. You can look like crap. You know who else did that? Michigan. And they won versus a crappy team, Northwestern. Like, I don't know. Like, you guys are like, oh, Bryce Underwood, 8 wins, Michigan. I was just hyping him up earlier. Did the same thing for Texas A&M. I keep it real around here. What's up? Indiana, I didn't slide them back after nearly losing to Penn State on the road, 3-6 football team who fired their head coach. Like, Indiana had to accumulate 1 football drive to win that football game. They did it. Great. They win. I'm not going to knock them for it. I was planning on moving Texas A&M in front of Indiana for a while because, well, like Indiana, Texas A&M is an undefeated SEC football team. And you're like, oh, A&M hasn't played anybody. Get out of here with that. Get out of here. It's like, oh, they played so many coaches that have fired their head. Brian Kelly was the head coach of LSU when they played. It's not A&M's fault that Missouri had a quarterback go down with an injury a week or so prior. They played a rivalry game at Arkansas. Arkansas scores 30 points a game. They did that against A&M, but A&M won the football game. And they played Notre Dame at the beginning of the year. They won that football game at Notre Dame. So I really don't want to hear it, and then they just beat South Carolina. They're going to play Texas at the end of the year. So all this notion that Texas A&M hasn't played anybody, and if anything, they have made, in certain cases, certain head coaches get fired. But I think we just need to understand that they have won those games. They have not dropped any of them like some other teams, and there's nothing to criticize. Like, why can't we just look at the team and go, wow, this team hasn't lost a game with an SEC schedule, which is 8 conference games, going to be 9 next year, with one of the out of conference games being a currently top 10 ranked Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Like, I just understand the hostility. We can just appreciate the fact that somebody's a good football team. And if they lose in the first round of the playoffs, or don't get a first round bye, or lose to Texas in the year, at the end of the day, I don't think anybody's fraudulent here. I really don't. Because it's the playoffs. You're going to play the best team who won their first game of the week in the playoffs and go play Texas A&M after a bye, most likely, at a neutral site, not even at home, at a neutral site. So let's hold our horses on that. Alternatively, the Oklahoma and Alabama game, I already covered that. I'll get into the prediction show, the Oregon hosting USC, some other big time matchups as well later this week. I'm trying to see if I forgot anything. Oh, I forgot to read my sponsors. Thank you to the Whining Irish. Those who bless Notre Dame will be blessed. That's what I believe. The committee believes that too. So if you are a Notre Dame Fighting Irish fan, your team is automatically in with a bid. That's why they don't join a conference. They don't play by the rules, similar to a foreign country. I don't think I'm really missing anything. I'm just making sure. I sometimes get ahead of myself. I'm like, I want to go into predictions. And I'm like, wait a minute. I'm going to probably do a prediction show now. We do 2 a week, right? The Tuesdays, the analysis, and the recap. And then Thursdays, the prediction show. So what are you predicting for, Jared? Well, I don't know. All I know is you guys might find this funny.
Texas loses to Georgia 35-10 and is now no longer a contender for the SEC championship game.
All right, I hope that maybe gave you guys some laughs. Look, I had a great time covering this. I appreciate the support. We're only going to get better as the season goes on, and I've had a great time with the STS poll. I know I keep saying that, but I've had a really great time doing it. I want to continue to work on my craft. As we get closer to December and with the new announcement coming, I'll be doing this. I'll be covering Tuesdays and Thursdays. I mean, we'll maybe have a guest on or a contributor on for the next prediction show or next week's Tuesday show to give one lap. I'll probably have both of them on for rivalry week. I think that is an overload of information. It'd be great to have Ryan and Jacob on the pod next week to forecast and just have one big show to forecast rivalry week. That way we're all ahead of the schedule for Thanksgiving and things like that. And I don't have to get too far into the weeds. So, but if you made it this far and you're a first time listener, I appreciate you joining in. I had a really great time at the A&M game. I can't stress that enough. It was the best A&M game I have been to in my life. I've missed a couple good ones. So, but our socials are in our link tree in the bios. So TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter, as well as YouTube Shorts. We're posting 30 to 60 second clips and tweeting out analysis, and then on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. I'm like brain fogging at the end of this episode, dude. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. you can watch or listen or podcast on those hosting platforms. Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your week, and Giga Maggies.